Yes, hi, good afternoon, how are you? These are our Master of Social Work students. We're so proud of them. Lauren Brown got married, and Ashton Boyd and Elizabeth Raines. And Dr. Newton helped us to connect with Piedmont, and we have started working with them on establishing the need for mental health services. And the class did that actually as a project and submitted it to them.
Thank you, Dr. Wickersham. So I'm going to kind of start out with our problem statement. And so Piedmont City Schools reached out to Dr. Newton and the social work department to kind of determine if their mental health services that they had in place were doing enough. And so as we were kind of formulating our problem statement and starting our research, we decided that they were reactive in nature instead of proactive. So we developed a needs assessment. So we wanted to look at some of the barriers that they had. So some of the barriers are really distinct to rural areas, such as financial issues, lack of access, lack of resources, and of course stigma. So, like I mentioned, the purpose of the study was to kind of dive deeper into their mental health resources and to look at if they were meeting the needs of students, but also to look at the perceptions of students, faculty and staff, and parents and guardians, since they are the stakeholders of Piedmont City Schools. And so we kind of wanted to get their consensus and their thoughts on the core community issues that they're facing.
So let's go ahead and talk about the methods. What we had is as Elizabeth had said before, we had the parents and guardians, the faculty and staff, and the students all participate in this convenient sample, and it was approximately 2,300 participants. So it was a pretty good amount. It could have been more, but I think it was a great sample for what we had to work with. And so the student population, it was surveyed separately. So we had the K through 5th grade and then the 6th through the 12th grade. They received very similar surveys, but it was just considered age appropriate because, a kindergartner may not understand what the word depression means. However, a 12th grader does. And so as far as accessibility goes, the faculty and staff, they were given links sent to their school email so they could take the survey. And the student population, as far as that goes, the K through the 3rd grade, they were given paper copies, and then the 4th through the 12th grade, they were given an online form that they could complete, but the students had to have the parental consent to complete the thing and the survey. And so as that was happening, when the parents were getting the consent form, they were also given the option of taking the survey as well, and the parents had the option of doing the online form or the paper survey. And the survey responses, they were limited as far as the time frame to 2 weeks. This kind of gave them an adequate amount of time to finish it in case they had work, school, other activities, anything like that. And the students who participated at all 3 schools, they were able to enter a drawing for a gift card. And as this picture shows, this was the day that the drawing happened for the gift cards.
So I'll be focusing on the results in the areas of interest. So once we got the responses back from the surveys that Lauren discussed, we coded these responses and came up with the results. And so overall, the participants of this survey reported that there is a lack of awareness of mental health services, and including what services are available and how to access them. The majority of the students stated that they would speak to someone about seeking mental health services, but were unaware of how to access these services. And along with this, the majority of the parents indicated that they would be comfortable with their children seeking mental health services through the school. And the faculty and staff reported that there aren't enough available services at the school and that there needs to be more education and training along with these.
So while Ashton hit the results, I'm going to hit the limitations a little bit. And so something that we noticed was there still is a big stigma around mental health. And so we really think that that contributed to our small response rate and our even smaller sample size. So while we did use a convenient sample of only about 2,300 people, we really had about less than 30% actually respond and complete our survey. So we think that this may be due to the stigma around mental health, and so one of the ideas for future research is having an opt-in form or an opt-out form instead of a permission slip. So the opt-out form automatically grants all the students access to take the survey unless the parent specifically identifies that.
And so the areas of interest from this research and this survey stated that over half of the elementary student respondents stated that they had felt sad and needed someone to talk to at school. And from the 6th through 12th grade responses, they reported that they have experienced issues completing their schoolwork and daily activities due to anxiety, depression, and feeling sad. And approximately 60% of the 6th through 12th grade students reported they had missed school or had wanted to miss school due to feeling overwhelmed. And half of the students reported an increase of anxiety and depression due to the current COVID-19 pandemic. And so, like Elizabeth said, we are still seeing that there is a stigma around mental health services and a lack of them in schools. And so the current MSW cohort is continuing this research.
So, are there any questions?
Yeah. You mentioned the stigma. Do you feel like that's a generational thing? Are we turning the corner where that is not as much of a thing? Or
I would like to think so. I think that this day and age, mental health and mental health issues are coming into the light more, and there's more conversation around them. And so I think that that's one of the reasons that we're seeing kind of an uptake of mental health issues, along with the past 3 years has been kind of a whirlwind. But hopefully I think that we are turning a corner, and we will see more a light shined on mental health and mental health issues, and potentially more resources and providers come out of that.
Do you know what plans Piedmont has as a result of this research?
Ideally, I think that they would like to get more funding for services in their schools. Right now, they have school-based mental health, but there's only one provider that they partner with, and so depending on the amount of students that they can take on their caseload and things like that, the resources are still very slim and limited.
I don't know if you looked at any of the literature that compared rural and urban, but I was wondering if you saw any differences between stigma towards mental health in rural versus urban communities.
I'm not sure necessarily on the stigma. I think that stigma is still very generalizable to rural and non-rural areas. I think one of the big differences is the resources that are granted. I think that non-rural areas have a lot more resources and a lot more providers, so I think that mental health services are easily accessible, and so I think that that in itself decreases some of the stigma in non-rural areas.
What did you say was the research question you guys was initially looking at?
So if Piedmont City Schools mental health services that they provided were reactive in nature instead of proactive.
How do you differentiate between rural and urban in Piedmont?
So Piedmont is all rural.
Yeah.
So we did a lit review in one of our classes and kind of looked at the definition of rural. And there's a lot of definitions and a variety of ways to define rural. And so we kind of looked at population size specifically. And so we determined that Piedmont was a rural area.
all right, let's thank our speakers.